if I set myself when someone said, would you write a workshop? This was months ago. I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And then you have to think about what you do, and I don't know, I suppose, really. So I, just so you know about where I'm coming from, I spent half of my week working for Space to Breathe with Andy Freeman, who was meant to do the previous workshop that I've just delivered, and he's not able to be here today. But and so my work focuses around supporting school staff with their well-being, on the premise of the fact that if we get it right for the adults who work with children and young people, then we get it right for young people. But the other half of my week, I work in an alternative education provision with young people who are not engaged in mainstream school for all sorts of different reasons. Generally speaking, a very vulnerable client group. And my career has been predominantly working in and around kind of education and support services with young people, providing sort of various levels of support. And I'm really passionate about this idea of those one-to-one relationships we can create with and for young people. And just to start saying a bit as we start, that I think sometimes when we think about mentoring, we think this is what mentoring's like. We think that it's about stimulating growth by telling someone everything we know and sharing all of our wisdom with them in the hope that that will kind of have an impact upon them. But actually, often when all you do is download your wisdom, that's unfortunately the results you get, because people turn off, switch off, and are not interested in what you've got to say. And so for me, there are many different definitions of mentoring, but my current working definition might be this. So for me, a mentor is someone who listens, shows understanding, and supports another person as they navigate life. And that could, and I'm not wedded to the word mentor either, by the way, just to say that could, lots of people do that. Some people have got the title of mentor, some people who've got the title, something very different, like even teacher, or youth worker, or even something very different, maybe person on the street even, you might say, that can help us to come across somebody. It's about that idea for me of listening, understanding, and supporting another person to navigate their life. I wonder, this morning we're thinking about this idea of growth and change, okay, and the difference between this idea of young people being asked to change rather than to grow. And I wonder if I can just get you to think for a moment. I should say right at the beginning of this, I'm not good and I don't like standing and talking at people for a long period of time. I like to involve people, engage people in a process of learning. So what I'm going to ask you to do today is to do a bit of work, if that's okay, along with me. So have a little chat maybe with the person next to you and have a little think about kind of when we think about young people, who around young people might want or need a young person to change, and who and why might someone be wanting a young person to change as well. Just have a chat with somebody next to you and come with a few ideas. So who and why?
When you said sorry.
Okay, just 10 more seconds just to finish off what you're saying, and then we'll have a little bit of feedback. Perhaps just tell me a little bit about what you were thinking about, kind of who and why might people want a young person to change?
Who might be a parent, teacher, youth worker, whoever is in charge.
Okay, interesting, yeah.
And the why might be because of the effects that things they're doing is having on other people, or maybe you feel the way they're behaving is going to make it difficult for them in society.
Yeah. Okay.
So we mentioned peers might want the young person to change, and that's to why, so that they conform to their norms and what they think is right.
And might it be in that, is what you're saying, that it might be uncomfortable for someone to be a certain something, and therefore someone wants to be, it makes them uncomfortable that you're behaving or being something that they don't want to be.
Yeah. We also said that the peers themselves may have to grow and change and work alongside this person, this individual. You shouldn't expect that individual to change it, people need to change around it.
We said sort of, in a good way, sort of the alternative that as a cure and a youth worker, we want our young people to grow in their faith. We want them to change, but in a positive way, i.e. own it themselves, not just give a textbook answer.
Yeah. So you might have a legitimate kind of thing that you want to kind of change because it's a part of what you believe is good for somebody, and it's the right thing for them to change.
And throw confidence, just you.
Yeah. Good.
They all seem to be very negative.
Yes.
So it's all like when you do something negative, and it's not necessarily always. It's like the confidence is changing into something positive, or growing, sorry, into something positive.
So when we're talking about change, we're often talking about behaviour, aren't we? We're often about things that are problematic behaviour or behaviour that other people are finding problematic, that we're wanting to change in somebody. And it's often about kind of wanting someone's behaviour to be able to kind of conform to or do something more that might be for their good. So that's not that's not all bad, is it? That actually it might be the fact we can see that behaviour is harmful or not good for them, or we can see a better option for them. So it's not always bad, it's not always kind of the wrong thing, but that we might have people who are often, I think someone over here said that the summary of what you said in terms of the people was about authority. Often people in authority kind of wanting people to make a change, to kind of almost like meet their sort of sense of agenda or whatever else, if you like. So I think when we're talking about this idea, we're thinking about young people's behaviour or the external thing changing. But what we know is that behaviour is often the thing that is just on the surface. Okay, you'll all be familiar with the concept of an iceberg and the idea that underneath an iceberg there is so much more going on. For every single person in this room this morning, in fact, so actually you are all behaving in a particular way right now, but actually underneath the surface of your behaviour is a whole load of other stuff going on that I can't necessarily see right now. Okay? And so actually that's true for every human being, that underneath the surface is always got stuff going on. Not always bad stuff, by the way, so let's not kind of focus on the negative, it can be good stuff, but there's always far more to what's going on for a person than there is that we see on the surface. And so I think it's really important, and we're thinking about working to help young people to change, that we recognise that actually that we can work on this bit on the surface here, but it's really important to recognise that that will be in some way informed by everything that's going on underneath the surface as well. And one way of us looking at this might be to remind ourselves, for some of us, this idea of Maslow, and as many of you will be familiar with this idea of Maslow, that ultimately we are all programmed to, as human beings, try and have certain needs met. Okay, there's also another version of that, by the way, which I think is a more modern version of that, which seems to be kind of, I can relate to that with myself, if I'm honest. So I travelled around New Zealand for a few months, and I know that felt like that was my most need to get someone else with Wi-Fi. Anyway, that's the kind of problem one. Okay, so this idea that actually, that as human beings, we are programmed to survive, and actually, I think I would go further to that and say we're actually programmed to thrive, actually, but we're not ready to thrive until actually some of our other survival needs are first met. And so often, what's going on underneath the surface of people's behaviour is a response to where they might be at on that kind of pyramid of needs. And if anyone's not familiar, just to very quickly say, the idea is that you don't start to meet the needs further up the pyramid until you've met the needs at the bottom of the pyramid first. And so actually, if you are not feeling safe, and we can think right now of people in the world whose basic safety needs are not being met because they are literally under threat. And actually, therefore, if that's the case, then you actually are not able to think about other things that might be further up that pyramid. And so when we're thinking a bit about kind of what might be going on for a young person, or any person for that matter, who we see as having some kind of problematic behaviour, or behaviour that we think might need to change, we might need to be thinking about what's going on in terms of this hierarchy of needs. Where are they on that hierarchy of needs in this particular setting? So if their behaviour is problematic in school, for instance, and that might be one example of a place where somebody might need a behaviour to change, then actually, while that might be legitimate that is problematic behaviour in the context it is, what is it that behaviour trying to get? Is it about the fact that child or young person's physiological needs are not being met? They've not had breakfast this morning. They've actually been in a situation where there's domestic violence in the home this morning. There's maybe something going on that's kind of making them feel profoundly unsafe on a physiological level, okay? And then the sort of idea of kind of human safety and security, the idea of loving belonging. Is there a sense in that young person feeling a bit displaced currently in their social group or their peer group? Is there a sense in which actually there's things going on in their family home at the moment which mean that actually they're not sure whether people still love them and they still belong there or not? Is there a sense of the fact that their self-esteem is being damaged or is being compromised or being challenged in some way by the work they're being currently asked to do or the other tasks they've got picked up to do in life, okay? And so what might it be that might be going on underneath the surface of behaviour? What need is trying to be achieved by behaving in the way that they might be behaving? So if I can get you to think a little bit for a moment about a young person that you know to be struggling at the moment, and maybe if I can just ask you for a few moments to have this idea in your head about what do you think needs are currently being met positively and well for that young person, and what needs might not be in your understanding of that young person being currently not met positively and well. And when I say positively and well, what I mean in a way that's not harmful to themselves or others. Okay, I'm defining that for you a little bit in terms of what I might mean by that. So just take a moment and maybe just jot down a few thoughts and think about, as I say, a young person who you know is struggling at the moment, and think about kind of that pyramid for a second and what they might be doing in terms of their needs and stuff. Is that alright? I'll give you sort of 3 or 4 minutes, is that alright? I don't particularly want to hear about individual sort of, certainly young people and their names certainly, but any particular reflections on what that, doing that activity, what kind of, wonder what was helpful about that and I wonder what was very challenging about that for you, so thinking about young people in that kind of way.
It just makes you really dig down deep into all of the people you see.
Yeah.
So, I'm the youth worker next door, and Crooks is a, I'm going to say lucky area, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
You know, you don't necessarily come across a child that's not eaten or has issues with drugs or whatever. But it then makes you dig down deep into, well, I've not seen such and such in a while. Are they okay? Why aren't they good at school? Oh, you know, this, that, or the other. And it makes you really dig down deep into why someone may not come or why someone may be a bit withdrawn in a session.
So the presenting behaviour is that somebody kind of doesn't come for a while. Presenting behaviour is that they maybe kind of withdraw or kind of whatever. But actually, looking beneath the surface of that, you can see that maybe there's something else going on there.
Yeah, like what's the why?
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Any other thoughts about what was helpful about that and what was challenging about that?
I've got a scenario where from the last, we've done something very positive and we've done something particularly well for her, to put her in an educational setting and etc. However, her perception of that, she's dealing with the transition, she's not dealing with it positively and well. So does that make sense? So
Yeah.
we as facilitators are doing something, it's not really received.
Because how it's landed somewhere different with her to how you actually intended it to, potentially, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
That's hard. So actually, and for her, where is that landed on that kind of that triangle, that pyramid?
She's right at the bottom, I reckon.
Okay. So physiologically, she's not feeling safe.
Yes.
Okay. That's hard, isn't it?
I know this might seem bad, but I think something that we tend to forget is your own reflection on what's happening. So, if somebody broaches something with you that is really touches a nerve, I think sometimes you want to take that step back in order to help them, even pass it on to somebody else, in order to help them achieve what's positive for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good. So actually, we need to recognise that we're not in this alone. Actually, that young people need a web, don't they, and a network of people. And lots of work around resilience would suggest that one of the protective factors in terms of resilience is around kind of ensuring that young people have access to the right support and a range of support and at different times as well, and timely support mechanisms as well, which isn't always easy to get, because as we've already said, the services stretch out and stuff like that. I don't think that Maslow is the only and the perfect way of looking at it, by the way. I just don't want me to say that. I think it was a way I felt like it was helpful to perhaps present this morning. I think human beings and young people are far more complex. And I think this was actually kind of back in the 1950s. I think we've moved on a little bit in terms of our kind of complexity of understanding about young people's needs and actually human needs, actually. But I think it's a helpful starting point in recognising that there's often more going underneath the surface than we might initially appreciate. And I think it's really important that we recognise that when we're working with people who we need to see change or want to see change, that actually we've got to look beyond that initial bit of the iceberg. We've got to start to understand a little bit more of what might be going on the surface, and this is some of the things that human beings were wired to need and want and kind of strive for, if you like. So thinking a bit about this idea of change and growth, this for me is a really helpful image. Every year I go and buy a real Christmas tree, judge me if you like, sorry. I love the smell of it, okay? And I put lots of lovely decorations on it, okay, and to make it into a little Christmas tree. There are some trees left in the field that carry on growing. My tree doesn't carry on growing, okay, because I've chopped it off of the root and I've put lots of lovely things on it. Although it looks like it's changed initially, okay, it sits in my living room as a changed tree, looking far more beautiful than it did in the field. but actually it then has a limited life. And I think that's the kind of image we need to have when we think about change and growth. That change is something that is temporary, change is something that's external, but actually my tree that sits in my living room at Christmas gets thrown out at the end of the season and doesn't grow any further. And the thing about that is that actually on the surface, the tree that carries on sitting in the field may not appear to change for quite a long time, okay? Depending on how quickly and the conditions that's given, that tree's put in, it may not grow, it may not appear to change as quick as I want it to do so. But it will, by definition, it will have to grow, okay? Because that's what trees do when they're left in fields and they're given the right conditions to do so, okay? And so so I think that this requirement is quite really helpful. Change may not always bring growth, but there's no growth without change, okay? And we have to sometimes trust the process of the fact that when we invest in growing people, rather than changing people, the change will come, but actually it might not look like we want it to, or we thought it should do, or it might not come as quick as we want it to. But it will happen. But actually we have to trust the process of that, and we have to trust the individual, and that's an empowering thing for me, about recognising that the individual themselves has got the capacity to grow ultimately. And I think that we're all ultimately wired to actually grow when we're given the right conditions to do so. I think that's how human beings are wired, and that's the whole self-actualization thing that we just saw in the pyramid a minute ago. If you put a potato in a dark room and have a crack of light, the potato will grow towards the light. And I think it's the same for human beings, that what happens is when we've got the right conditions, then actually grow towards the light, and we are naturally have a propensity to want to grow. But we don't do that always quickly, and we don't always do that at the time frame that other people might want us to do so. What's guaranteed though is that the external change may not always bring the growth. And I've worked with loads of people over the year who've done really well when they've been through a programme of change, kind of suddenly becoming a really well-behaved child in a primary school classroom or a secondary school classroom or whatever, but it's not sustained because actually it's not being growth, it's being change that's happened with that young person. Someone's imposed on them and manipulated them, if you like, to be able to change for a short period of time, and they've got initial kind of joy out of that, but then actually the novelty wears out because no one's actually helped that young person to grow internally. So I think, and I'm not saying that I am the only expert in this, by the way, I need to say that, I should have said that at the beginning actually. I don't believe I have all the answers, I need to tell you that. So sorry if that's kind of misinformation or kind of transcriptions that I kind of in any way suggest at the beginning, or you came thinking I might do. I have some ideas, I think, about what I think we need to do in terms of creating the right conditions for growth. And I love alliteration, and I love the rule of three, because it just helps me to kind of remember things. So I've come up with a rule of three and alliteration. Okay, so I think we need acceptance, we need agency, and we need alternatives. We need to give young people, give these young people, we need to give young people acceptance, we need to give young people agency, and we need to give young people alternatives. I think when we do that, I think that supports young people to grow. I'm going to look at each of these three things in a bit more detail with us. We'll look at these things together in a bit more detail now, if that's okay. So, with acceptance, I think that when we accept young people, then I think we need to recognise these things here, okay? Change is risky, okay? It could go wrong. Staying in my lane and carrying on doing what I'm doing, I know what results I'm going to get. And even if the results aren't positive, at least I know what I'm going to get. Because actually, there's some certainty about that. If I suddenly change, then maybe it won't go right. Maybe it will work out, but maybe it won't. Maybe it'll make things worse. So for any of us to make any kind of change in life, then we are taking a risk, okay? And we need a secure base from which to try things out, okay? And actually we need people around us who are going to allow us to get it wrong when we try something different, okay? And so acceptance and creating an environment of acceptance helps people, I think, to do that. People are more likely to change when they have unconditional love around them. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, said the curious paradox is that when we accept ourselves as we are, then we will change. And there's the whole thing about the idea that when we can accept ourselves for who we are, then as individuals, then actually we are more likely to have that secure base from which to change. Acceptance builds self-esteem and makes someone feel like they deserve better. So one of the reasons why people don't change sometimes is because they don't think that they're worth a different alternative. They don't believe that they deserve the kind of better thing that might do them better. Okay, they might deserve they may feel like they deserve to feel like they feel. For me, acceptance of people is often shown by listening and and that person being heard and validated. And the better our listening skills are, and when I talk about listening skills, I mean not just listening to words, but I mean listening to the whole person, which involves listening to watching and noticing someone's body and their kind of their tone of voice as well, and their congruence. So are they saying what they really think? And is what they're saying what they really think, or is it actually, are they trying to tell you something they think they ought to say? Is there kind of some sense of which their body language tells you that they don't really believe what they're telling you, all that kind of stuff? That kind of listening environment, and the better we can be at listening to people and to young people and making them feel heard and feel validated, the more that gives it a message of acceptance. And often what young people will do, and actually when I say young people, I mean people actually, will do, is they will test out what happens when they make changes. Who notices it, and what reaction it gets. Okay? They'll be testing out, does that work for me? And actually, what does that look like for the people? And does it get me kind of some kind of approval or not? Okay, so they're looking out for kind of what reaction they get from you, but also from their peers, from their parents, from their wider kind of sort of group of people around them, the kind of the network around them and stuff as well. So I wonder if I could get you to reflect, what might a supportive adult do to show acceptance? Just maybe have a chat with the person next to you. What might a supportive adult do to express practically acceptance? So when I ask that question, I'm asking you to think about, if it was videoed, what would I be seeing back on that video? Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay? Have a good chat with someone next to you. Okay, give me a few ideas about things that you have been saying about kind of what you think might show this. What kind of thoughts did you have?
I think you say we accept it. I think I treat them like people.
Yes.
They're not aliens, they're people, you know.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is, I think that I do it myself, and I'm trying really hard not to, but we can talk to people in a particular kind of way doesn't respect the fact that they're we don't talk to them the same way as adults. Like, if I was in a room with a room full of teenagers, I might not talk to them in quite the same way. And that might be appropriate, but it also might be not appropriate.
Yeah.
I've also been in loads of meetings where people don't talk to the young person, and they talk about the young person while the young person's sat there. They don't ever address the young person. They don't give the young person eye contact. So I make a really deliberate effort if I'm in a multi-agency meeting where the young person's there, that I actually don't talk to the adults, I talk to the young person. And I might then talk to the adults, but then I actually talk to the young person.
Because I've stopped meetings before and said, right, I'm actually going to address this person. So it's their meeting, not yours.
Yeah.
So you need to listen to them. Didn't go down very well, but they did do it.
Yeah.
Great. Other thoughts then? Other ideas?
I think it's about like building a culture of acceptance, whichever group, whatever, so it's like, was it a youth group or was it a classroom setting? I think, I'm not always. I mean, some people are very good on giving particular praise or awards or kind of lots of positive, writing little nice notes. It's like interesting with my class was I'm a year 5 teacher, and I'm not very good at these all these little things. I always forget to do this, but I think my bottom line is my kids know that I know who they are. And then we have a laugh together, and it's a genuine, authentic relationship. It's not ticking a box or following a script. It's like coming and having a chat, having a laugh, and doing a bit of teaching and learning as well. I think with my youth group, it's that kind of, or like you say, not patronising them, knowing that actually, you talk to them like they're adults, they are people who deserve respect, and it's an authentic relationship.
Yeah.
And that feels like you're talking about creating a sense of belonging in a place, aren't you?
Yeah.
And that's acceptance, isn't it? And creating an environment where individuals feel like they belong. So that's really good. I quite like the way you thought, that's good.
Yeah, we said authenticity a lot.
Yeah.
Some of the best judges' character I know are young people. So if you're not sincere with them, they're not engaged. So it's that sincerity and that acceptance, that building that culture is so key.
Yeah, that's good.
On the listening bit, you're saying we're actively listening to you, and not just instead of saying, I hear what you're saying, have I interpreted this right? And actually having that active conversation with them to help them feel accepted and belong.
Yeah, that's good.
I was saying finding other ways than listening to verbalisations, because some children with learning difficulties find it very, very difficult
Yeah.
to verbalise what they're feeling.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about children who can't talk.
Mhm.
There are children who can talk very well and they mask actually how they're processing and dealing, and they find it very, very difficult to verbalise what they've done in the day, their feelings or anything else. So it's trying to find other ways to help them express that and listen in a different way.
Yeah. And then validating that as well, isn't it? And reflecting back that stuff as well, isn't it? For me, this is really important about our hearts in this, and I think I don't always get up in the morning and have all the capacity I need, okay? I don't know if you have that experience, and maybe other people have that experience, but I sometimes have to make an active choice to take myself into a room and say, do you know what, I'm not feeling it today, but actually this young person deserves me to bring myself into the room, and I have to actively choose to bring my heart into the space, and to be genuinely concerned, not concerned in a patronising way, but genuinely for that young person who's in front of me at that particular time. And as I say, some days that comes naturally, but some days that requires me to make a choice about the fact that, do you know what, I'm going to have to put that stuff to one side for a minute, because for me right now, it's really important that this young person knows that my heart is in a room with them, and that I am thinking about kind of, I'm basically coming into the room loving, with the desire to love this young person in front of me, and that's what acceptance is about, isn't it? So I wonder if I can get you to reflect, and this might be a hard thing to ask you to do, okay, but I want you to be really honest with yourself, okay, really honest with yourself, okay. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you people that you work with rate you for acceptance? I don't want you to say that out loud, by the way. I want you just to think about it in your head and just have it in your head. And I want you to know there's no judgment, there's acceptance wherever you are on that scale. If you tell me you're a 5, I don't believe you, by the way, I'm just going to say that. So if you tell me you're a 5, I don't really believe you. But maybe you are, and so, that's fine. But I just have to think about that for a moment. And I think that where you are is okay. Accept yourself, accept the fact that it's reality, okay? But when you accept yourself, then you might change, if that makes sense, okay? So don't try and change that, just be aware of yourself, and aware of the fact that sometimes you might not be as accepting as you might like to be, and just be really aware of that for now, okay? And sit with that and kind of just, and consider what, maybe even, that's maybe something to bring to prayer in terms of how you respond to that, I don't know. Okay, I'm going to move on, I'm really conscious of time. So, agency is the second thing I want to think about a little bit. Okay, so young people grow when they have a sense of agency, a sense of that they are able to make things happen, okay? The ability to make things happen. And that for me is about us as adults noticing their positive character traits and skills. It's not about praising them when they do something really nice, it's about noticing their character rather than their actions, if that makes sense. So noticing the way they do something rather than what they do, and pointing that out and drawing attention to that. Some young people really struggle if you would do that in front of other people. Some people would really love you to do it in front of other people as well, as it's about knowing you're a young person and knowing what works for them, and having that sense of being able to draw attention to what you noticed about them being positive. So I was in a meeting yesterday with a young person who may be coming to our provision Shaped, and I was trying to make sure that I drew out of him what I noticed about what he said that tells me something of his positive attributes and stuff like that. It seems like you're actually a really caring person. It seems like actually you really do want to do well. And I was trying to make sure that I brought that out, because other people maybe don't say that to him and notice that impacts the way that maybe he needs that to be the case. Drawing attention to success in any field, not just in the space, in the way that you want them to change, because actually agency is something that is almost like a resource, okay? And the more general agency I feel, the more that will kind of feed into specific agency. Does that make sense? The idea that actually, if I start to feel that I can make a difference, and that I have got an effect on the world, and I can make things happen in one area of my life, it might give me a confidence to try it out in a different part of my life. So a lot of the work that we used to do when I was working in a different kind of therapeutic assessing with young people was, we did lots of stuff around things like cooking and art, things where they were able to kind of have some sense of outcome and success, and we tried to then kind of celebrate those little things. But what we found is, when we did that, is that actually it gave people increased confidence to do other things but not to do with cooking and art, because they had a general sense of esteem, a general sense of agency, I might say, about themselves as a person. And also treating young people as experts, not novices. So using wondering questions. I love a wondering question. I wonder, What else would you say to someone else in your situation? Turning something back to a young person and recognising they have expertise. I came across a brilliant thought in a book I read recently called The Solomon's Paradox. And again, this is about people, this isn't about young people necessarily. The Solomon's Paradox is this idea, have I said this already today to you? No, I said it to the last group. Okay, just make sure I'm not repeating myself. The Solomon's Paradox is this great concept, this idea that we're all able to be experts in other people's lives, but we're not always able to have the same objectivity to the expert in our own lives. Anyone relate to that? Yeah, okay? Right, so I know I can solve your problems, no problem at all. I know exactly what you need to do, right? But actually, same problem for myself, I've got no idea. Or I don't do it. Do you know what I mean? I don't follow my own brilliant advice, okay? We've often got brilliant advice to give ourselves, but we don't give it to ourselves because we're not given space to process it sometimes. We're not given an opportunity to think about that and objectivity. And sometimes when we step back from our own situation and recognise, what would somebody else in that situation, let's just look at that for a minute, what would somebody else in that situation benefit from right now? That makes them somebody into an expert and helps them to take advantage of the Solomon's Paradox. So, thinking about those things for a minute, which of those things is the easiest and which of those things is hardest? Just 2 minutes with the person next to you to reflect on that for a moment. Which of those things on that screen are easiest to do and which is the hardest for you? Okay, so I'm not going to take any feedback about that because I think that the conversations you've had between you are probably sufficient for you to kind of take the learning from that bit, if that's okay. And we'll move on now to think about alternatives, okay? So, when we are giving young people alternatives, okay, I think we need to recognise that every change, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, every change involves a loss, okay? So if I stop doing something, then if I start doing something, I'm going to have to stop doing something, okay? If I change my behaviour, there'll be something that's lost. It might be a good thing that's lost, but still it might be a loss, okay? And the reason why I don't change sometimes, okay, the reason why I haven't yet in March joined the gym yet, is because if I did, then I would lose some extra time in bed in the morning, okay? So there are benefits to me joining the gym, but I haven't yet done it because the loss is my time, my freedom, my whatever else, okay? So young people need the benefit of changing to be greater than not. I need the benefit of going to the gym I need to feel that benefit more than the benefit of my bed in the morning, okay? In fact, at the moment, my bed is calling me far more, okay? Sometimes young people might test out, and I think again, this is human beings, we test out which alternatives bring the greatest gains to us overall, okay? What's the net result? Not the gross, but the net result, okay? So some alternatives might bring some good stuff, but they also might bring with it bad stuff. It might bring ridicule with it, okay? I change my haircut, that might bring some great benefits, but it also might bring ridicule as well. So actually, on balance, do I have my hair cut differently, or do I not? Okay? Maybe I've got to weigh that up, have a nice version of it. They will be looking out for people who won't judge them to process the benefits and losses with, okay? So I think that when young people are trying to make changes and trying to do things differently, then they'll be looking to kind of, to be processing that. Like, how did that work out for you? And actually, oh, aren't you stupid? What a stupid idea you did that for. Not going to be helpful, okay? Instead, more that kind of idea, oh, that really worked out, that was a shame, wasn't it? I can see what you were trying to do there. I can see what you were trying to achieve there. It did work out. That's annoying, isn't it? I can see that's really frustrating, isn't it, like that, when that happened. And actually, so what else could we do instead? You know, kind of picking up the pieces again afterwards. And also recognising, and this is a bit that may be contradictory to everything I've said so far today about treating them as experts and all that kind of stuff, but there is something about the fact that young people generally do have some information gaps, okay? They do like experience, they do like actual information, and actually part of what's happening is they learn and grow. And I, as a 44-year-old person, also have some information gaps about my life. I don't have all the information I need, okay? And so I need sometimes people to tell me and give me some different information, okay? And so there are times when actually we do need to fill that information gap. We need to spot when it's okay, when that information gap is there. They really don't know about kind of what the benefit, what the consequences are of smoking cannabis. They don't know that. They've got an information gap there. They don't know how to stop doing that, smoking cannabis. They don't have the information available to them. They don't have resources to do. And that might be when we need to step in. However, I find this really, really helpful. I'm going to tell you a story. I hope no one's grossed out by verrucas. Anyone grossed out by verrucas? Give you a moment to leave the room if you need to. Okay. So So during lockdown, I had a verruca on my foot, okay? Anyone who's had a verruca will know it's quite a painful thing. It's not the end of the world. It's not quite the same scale as a pandemic. It's not across the world, okay? But it wasn't really, alright? So I recognised the fact that there was people who were having some quite difficult experiences in lockdown with their health and all the rest of it. Some quite big risks, but I was there with my verruca, alright? And for me, my verruca was a pain in the foot, basically. So it was really painful, okay? But in the context of the pandemic, I didn't want to bother my GP about that because, like, do you know what? You've got things to deal with, haven't you? Do you know what I mean? So I left it and I carried on suffering with my verruca for some time. Eventually, as kind of things started to get a little bit more kind of whatever, a bit more kind of sane maybe, I contacted my GP, thinking like, really, do I really need to speak to my GP about this? Is he really going to think, he or she going to think, like, who are you, what, you know, get a life, sort yourself out, go and buy some self-medication from the counter or whatever. So I was feeling a bit insecure about, am I just bothering my GP about something really quite trivial here, okay? And I spoke to my GP and he was brilliant, okay? It was a phone consultation. And he was brilliant because he used something which I didn't realise he was doing at the time, but he used this model of elicit, inform, elicit. And I came off that 8-minute or 10-minute phone call and I was like, that was brilliant, that was amazing. And I didn't know what he'd done to me, but I just felt brilliant. He'd not even touched my foot, by the way, just to be really clear, because it was a phone call. But what he'd done is he had validated my experience, the pain that I was suffering with my verruca. I felt genuinely understood, heard, and validated for the discomfort and the inconvenience my verruca was causing me. He'd elicited that information from me, okay? And because I then felt validated, I was ready to receive some information gap. He gave me 3 options of things that I could do to take that forward, okay? And he didn't give me one solution, he gave me a few solutions of things that I'm able to do to take that forward. And then what he then did is he threw the question back to me and said, I wonder which of those things you think might work for you, or you'd like to give a go. And I was given some choice, and I was empowered to make a choice about kind of actually how I then dealt with that. Who knew it involved duct tape, but it did, okay? This is just a side bit of extra free information for you this morning, but the duct tape was what solved the problem, right? Just in case you need the end of that story. But the process for me was far more important, and actually what I've got out of that process was far more important than actually the healing of the verruca, right? Because actually I went away and reflected on what he'd done, and I googled it, and I was thinking, what's the euro? And basically worked out that he'd use this modelling, elicit, inform, elicit. And I think when we want to give young people information to fill that information gap, then I think that this can be a great way of getting that balance between making sure we're empowering and we're validating or we're listening or accepting a young person's experience. And that process, as I said, took 10 minutes on a phone conversation. I've also used that model and it's taken an hour, 2 hours, several weeks as well as, okay? So I think there's a process with different layers to it as well. But I think there's something about this idea of feeling validated first, being given some options of information, and then being given some choice about what I want to act upon, rather than being given a simple and simplistic sometimes solution. So, we've thought together about this idea that young people's behaviour that may be problematic to themselves and other people is often the tip of the iceberg, and there's things going on underneath. We've thought about what some of those things might be rooted in. We've thought about Maslow as one way of thinking about what young people's needs might be, and we've thought a little bit about what it might take to help young people to grow and not simply change. So, as we've done that, I wonder if I can just ask you to reflect before we walk away. One of my wondering questions, just for yourself. I wonder what's been the most important thing about this session for you. I wonder what you might want to do as a result of today's session. I wonder what your very next step will be.
Really bad that I just thought lunch.
That's an honest and real answer, and I totally agree with you. Thanks for your engagement in that. You brought that into life, so thank you very much for the way you engaged with that. Just to flag up this youth work survey again to you, if you do know people that's relevant to, we're really grateful for you passing the information about around and on, so we can capture as much as possible. I hope that's been useful, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.